Okay, so thank you all for coming today and joining us. So today's meeting is going to be about an hour long. Usha will just take a few minutes to give you an overview of the project, where we're at right now. And then I'm going to take half an hour presenting some of the major findings from both the focus groups and the surveys. And then we'll have around 20 minutes at the end for discussion and any questions or comments. Okay, so Usha, if you want to.
Yeah, okay, sure. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for agreeing to come online. Actually, all I want to say is, do you want to go around introducing yourselves so you can all see each other? So is that okay? Or how do we want to do that? Maybe just quick introduction. Okay, Shamira, can you start from there?
Sure, I can do that. Hi, everyone. My name is Tearney McDermott, and I worked on this project as a research assistant while I was completing my PhD here at Western. So I helped with the translation of the interview scripts from Arabic to English and also with the coding.
Right. Vera?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vera Dogic, and I manage the City of Toronto's newcomer office.
Esme? Esme? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm freezing a little bit.
Yeah,
Hi,
yeah.
I'm Esme Fuller-Thompson. I'm at the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto, and I run the Institute for Life Course and Aging.
Thank you. Okay. Hannah?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Dada. It was a good and very nice opportunity to be part of this project. Nowadays, I am a student at Seneca College Social Service Worker Program. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yasmin?
Hey, good morning, everyone. So I'm here today on behalf of Jemima, our CEO. I'm very new to CultureLink, and I understand that CultureLink was involved in this project, so I am excited to hear about the learning.
And everybody knows Aicha. And Abir?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Abir Tayyib. I was working with the group research assistant, now waiting. Yeah,
Right,
nice
right.
to see you all again.
Right. Marona?
Hi, everyone. I'm a community development officer with the City of Toronto's newcomer office, part of Vera's team.
Tia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tearney. I coordinate the Center for Immigration and Settlement here at X University, and I have sort of helped with the administrative side of this project throughout. It's nice to see you all.
Yeah, Gaida?
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again all. I worked on this project as a research assistant before, and now I'm working as a Syrian support worker, and I work as a research assistant for York University now.
Right. Very good. Marwa?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Manoj Bilal, and I am also a research assistant with the Harrison with this project. And right now I am youth and newcomer engager at Cambridge Community Association. Thank you.
Okay. And Marika?
Hi, I'm Marika Alec. I'm with the Private Refugee Sponsorship Network.
Right, yeah. Did I miss anyone? Sam?
Hi, Fazana Chase. I work at the Faculty of Applied Health and Community Studies at Sheridan College.
Right, right. Okay, so thank you. Oh, first
and
of all,
Fumi.
Oh, where's Fumi? Oh, did I miss her? Oh, sorry, Fumi. You from this corner, you went to that corner. That's why I didn't see you. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fumi. I'm presently a research assistant and a practicum student, and I'm working presently with Tearney and Usha with a project, family reunification, and I'm happy to see everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so all I want to do is to thank you all for being part.
Someone forget me, so I will do it myself.
Right.
Good morning, everybody. This is Sami. Sorry, my camera is not working now. I'm the president of Syrian Community Center. Long time no talk, Usha and Aicha. Nice to talk to you again. And hopefully this collaboration with Syrian Community Center will go further.
Right.
Take care.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the purpose of this meeting is definitely first to thank you for your participation This project has been extremely successful in getting all the data we needed. It went according to plan. Usually when you say you'll interview so many people, sometimes it doesn't happen, but this one was beyond our expectation. It gathered all the kind of the numbers that we wanted, all the types of individuals to be interviewed and so on. So I want to thank the research team headed by Aicha for that fabulous job. Right now, as you know, the data collection is over. The quantitative data is being analyzed or even cleaned up and analyzed by one of our statistical experts called Joanne. And of course, Esme is also giving some direction to that. The qualitative data has been kind of temporarily, tentatively organized, which we'll hear now. But again, we hope to write some papers on it and so on. But moving forward, we are very keen to find out why one of the issues that came up quite often in these interviews was about family reunification. People are upset about that. People wanted a little more leeway into that 1-year window that they all have, especially the government-sponsored refugees. So we are right now in the process of submitting another application to SHRC for a 2-day conference on family reunification. Actually, the deadline is tomorrow. So the application is almost ready. Tearney is putting some final touches to it. And so we hope that there will be a lot more participation of the real people who came in and who wants this to be done, so that we can hear those voices. And always our hope is that the policy community, the government will listen, and we'll try our best to do that. But that's the kind of follow-up from that project. Okay, so I'll stop there. And once again, thank you all for being part of this. We have been very excited about this project. Any quick questions? If not, I'll pass it on to Aicha.
Okay, thank you, Usha. Yeah, family reunification was one of the themes that emerged. And initially I did have it in the presentation, but I had to remove it because half an hour was not enough to cover everything. But that is something that we can definitely have another meeting about if anyone is interested in learning more about that. We do have some data on that. But I'm just going to share my screen now, the presentation. Okay, so everyone can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. All right. So like Usha said, we just finished this project. We had, so the presentation today is based on data from our focus groups and also data from the surveys. And we were looking at the experiences specifically of Syrian refugees in Toronto and Mississauga, and with the focus on the role of social capital on their experiences. So since we're exploring social capital, we wanted to see refugees' social capital before they came to Canada. So we found that around a third of our participants had family members or friends already living in Canada, and they provided them with support with housing, information, moral support, and so on. But not necessarily everyone who had relatives here received support from them. Some people didn't have good relationships with their relatives, or some people just didn't feel comfortable asking for help. So we can't assume that everyone who has relatives in Canada or friends would necessarily get support from them. So once refugees started arriving here, they started forming new connections, new relationships with their sponsors, with volunteers, a lot of the government-sponsored refugees. Oh, I forgot to say that our study was comparing the differences between private-sponsored and government-sponsored, and also the differences between men and women. So when there are differences, I will point them out. If I don't point them out, it just means that there were no differences and that both groups had similar experiences. So with volunteers, more government-sponsored refugees dealt with volunteers. And also people talked about meeting neighbors, meeting other refugees on the plane to Canada, in hotels, through government organizations. And these refugees provided support for each other throughout their time here in Canada. Some of them formed Facebook groups. Gaida is actually one of the founders of one of the biggest Facebook groups that provide support to newcomers. And also they have small WhatsApp groups where they share information with each other. And they've also made friends in different places. So one of the difficulties that they're facing is forming relationships with non-Arabs. And that's because a lot of them have difficulties or lack of opportunities to meet non-Arabs. A lot of the Syrian refugees live in like clusters. So they live in Scarborough, Etobicoke, Mississauga. And they don't have a lot of opportunities to meet non-Arabs. Like the Etobicoke group told us that when they go to their pharmacy or their doctor or grocery store, everyone speaks Arabic. They said that they were expecting to meet like blonde and blue-eyed people, but they didn't really meet many people like that. And also language is a barrier because it's difficult for them to initiate maybe conversations, or they feel sometimes intimidated to approach people. Some of them have said that they feel like English speakers don't have the time to sit there and listen to them while they're trying to form a sentence or trying to remember the words to have a fluid conversation. And because of this, it might limit their knowledge and their exposure to Canadian life. So for example, the groups some of the WhatsApp groups, they said that their groups are composed exclusively of refugees, so they don't have any outsiders. And that could be good because they do share information with each other and they do support each other, but that knowledge could be limited and they may not have the opportunities to expand their networks. And also it affects other areas of their life, like we'll discuss later. So organizations and sponsors can maybe help with this to arrange more opportunities for them to meet non-Arabs. One of the things that for those who said they have formed relationships with non-Arabs, one of the questions that I would ask in the focus group is who initiated this relationship? And most of the time it's the other person who initiated the relationship. And that's because sometimes they don't know how the other person is going to react to them being a refugee or being Syrian or not knowing English. So they might be intimidated to be the ones who initiate. So if they're the ones who, if they have to wait for others to initiate, they may not form those relationships. But if they are given opportunities through organized events, through organizations, or matching them with volunteers, it's going to increase their chances of meeting non-Arabs who are willing to take the time to befriend them. And also a lot of them said that even when they do meet people, they feel like they have a limited social life because here Canadians are really busy. Our life is so fast paced and we don't know how to relax. Syrians have a different, their culture, like they're very social. They know how to have fun and they like to have people over in their homes, and they don't feel like Canadians are necessarily open to that. They just want to meet for a quick coffee and then just go home. So they feel like that prevents them from having an active social life. And women, specifically women who don't work, said that their social life is limited because they don't have a physical space to meet. So they go from their home to their school for ESL classes, and then they come home and they feel bored and they feel suppressed. So they requested a space for them to meet for informal social activities. They said if they meet in each other's homes, especially those who live in apartment buildings, they get complaints from their neighbors because their kids make too much noise. So they said an organization used to have these kind of informal activities where they would do cooking or jewelry making, arts, things like that. But then they incorporated English into it, and then people stopped showing up. So they want those sort of activities where they can meet each other for a few hours, do something fun, and then when they go home, they're a bit more relaxed and ready to deal with their kids. So a lot of people who've had experiences with settlement organizations said their experiences were very positive. They helped them with a lot of things like housing, providing furniture, registering in school and ESL, interpretation, healthcare, and providing information. But there were some people who said they've had negative experiences with organizations. They felt like they were ignored, or their calls were not returned, or they never met the worker they were assigned to. Some people would get a call a year later saying, we want to do a survey with you about this person who was supposed to come and provide a service, but that person had never shown up. So 21% said they believe organizations were only interested in registering them as clients without providing services. So they feel like these organizations are receiving funding on their behalf, but they're not giving the newcomers anything back. And there's an idea that PSRs, that I've read in a lot of reports and media, that PSRs do better than government-sponsored refugees because they have more support, so they thrive better in Canada. But that's not necessarily true for everyone. We found that some PSRs, those who were sponsored by the Group of Five, do really well, because their Group of Five are usually people who chose to do this, and they're extremely dedicated, and they give them try to do as much as possible to help them with every aspect of resettlement. But there are 52% of people, PSRs in our survey, said they didn't receive help from their sponsors. Some of these have never met their sponsors. So they're not necessarily getting the help that everyone assumes that they're receiving. And in terms of accessing the settlement organizations, only 33% PSRs access them compared to 91%. And even this 33% may not necessarily be in the first year, because some of them don't even know about these services until a year later or 2 years later. And like we said, with volunteers, a lot of government-sponsored refugees met volunteers through the hotel, especially at the beginning when there was a lot of media coverage, and people were flooding with volunteers, but none of the PSRs said that they received any help from volunteers in their resettlement. So we had people who said like they didn't even know, PSRs who said they didn't know about English classes, they didn't know about a lot of services that could have helped them during their first year to resettle. So it's important for all refugees, regardless of their sponsorship pathway, to get access to the same information. So as soon as they arrive in Canada, they should have access to like a booklet or videos, or be invited to a workshop where they are told about the services. And there are some PSRs who are not going to access these services because they're well taken care of by their sponsors. But for those who are not well taken care of, then at least they have this other option that they can access without having to figure out things on their own. So after the first year of sponsorship, whether by the government or private, a majority said that they can manage their day-to-day life without any help, but 72% said they still need support to reach their goals. So their needs change over time. At the beginning, they might need help with housing and the basic things, but over time, as they learn the basics and with English and Canadian life, they may not need help with those things, like going to a grocery store, but they may still need help with employment and other things. So many participants said that they would like that the support is not just during the first year, but continues beyond the first year. And one of the things that they said they would like help with is documents and filling out forms. This is a major source of stress for a lot of people. Even those who have good levels of English say they still need help with documents because they can be complicated, and they want someone to help them fill them out or make sure that they fill them out properly. So this is one of the things that they want to, and some organizations still offer help with this. So employment is one of the major themes that emerged, and understandably, any questions I asked in the focus group always goes back to employment. So what we found is that the majority participants said that they're finding it difficult to find work. In our surveys, 17% were employed full-time, 15% were employed part-time, and 2% were self-employed. We found PSRs in the surveys, we found that PSRs are more likely to be employed than GARs, but actually in the focus groups, GARs were more likely to be employed than PSRs. So there's a little bit of a difference there. We found that level of education doesn't have an impact. That's also understandable because a lot of people's credentials are not recognized. And 54% said that being employed negatively affected their mental health. And we know that people, whether immigrants, refugees, newcomers in general, the longer they stay unemployed and they can't find work, the more likely that they are to fall into depression. So people have found work through different means. 48% of those who did find work, they found it through a friend. 18% found it on their own, 14% through a sponsor, 10% through a family member, 10% through an employment program, and 4% through volunteers. And this shows us that how difficult it is to find work on their own just by sending out applications and not getting any college experience. So it's easier to find work if they have someone helping them, referring them to a job. So there are quite a few barriers to employment, and I'm only going to discuss 3 of the major ones. And the first is language. Only 63% felt like language is the main obstacle to employment. And 47% felt like they were discriminated against because of their language while they're looking for work. And when we asked them if they felt like they were discriminated against because of their ethnicity or religion, those were really low. So language was felt like it was the highest reason for discrimination. And we also found that those who have intermediate or advanced language skills are more likely to be employed. And this could be because those who have the language skills are able to find work, but it also could be that those who were employed learned English through work. So what we found interesting is that previously the people in the focus groups who found work through a sponsor or a friend or family member, they were able to get hired despite their language abilities. So this was no longer a barrier once they were referred by someone that they knew. Lack of Canadian experience is also another barrier. People feel like their previous experience of 20, 30 years is being completely devalued, and they said that they're turned into zero, they're turned into nothing, they feel like they're worthless. They're also being asked for Canadian references, which they don't have. So a lot of people are saying if they keep asking us for Canadian experience, but we can't even get jobs, then how is this supposed to work? And also accreditation is a barrier for a lot of people. A lot of Syrians think that they have the abilities to fill in the gaps in our labor market, but because of the difficulties in accreditation, their capacities are being wasted. So a lot of them feel like they don't have a future in Canada if they can't work in their fields and they can't contribute. So some of the things that can be done to address these barriers is, one, we have to give realistic arrival in Canada. And even after their arrival, when they're dealing with people or employment programs, they get told, oh, it's really easy to get accredited. Your job is in high demand. You can get a job very easily. But then when they actually start the process, they realize how difficult it is. So at least telling them about how difficult it can be, how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, would allow them to mentally be prepared for it, and then they can deal with the process if they still want to go through with it. And for some people, getting this information before they arrive in Canada can be helpful, because I've heard some say, if I had known that this accreditation process is this difficult, I wouldn't have come to Canada. There are refugees who didn't have a choice on where to go. Canada was their only option, but there were some like government-sponsored refugees who had a choice between Canada, Australia, and Europe. And some people have said, I would rather have gone to Europe because accreditation there, like Germany, is much easier. Also, starting accreditation process before they arrive would be helpful if they had this information, so that at least they can get their paperwork ready and they can shorten the period where for the accreditation, and also they can get their paperwork, because some people come here and then they realize they don't have the necessary documents to start the process. Referring refugees, like we've showed, that is really helpful for them to get their first job. So it's much more effective than them trying to find a job on their own just by applying online, or because a lot of people have done callbacks. And also helping them develop professional networks where they can be introduced to people in their field, and those people can educate them, whether it's about the accreditation process, or just helping them, connecting them with people, maybe potential employers who can refer them to a job. Internships can also be quite helpful, especially during the first year when their costs are being covered by the sponsors. If they are enrolled in an internship, they can learn English, they can be exposed to the Canadian work culture, so they're gaining the Canadian experience. So by the time they finish the internship, they might have Canadian references and Canadian experience, and they might have met people who can introduce them to to other people who can get them their first job. Volunteering has also been shown to help gain Canadian experience and meet the right people. But volunteering can also be difficult. A lot of volunteer positions require references, they require resumes and experience that they may not have. So helping them find volunteer positions can also help them in those first steps to employment. Children and childcare is also a barrier mainly for women, either because childcare is really expensive, so they think that going to work is not worth it, or because going to school or going to work creates distance between mothers and their children. They feel like they don't have enough time to spend with their children, so they find that their children are a priority. They'd rather wait until their children are older before they go to work. So what have they done to overcome some of these barriers? Professionals are working blue-collar jobs. There are people who, like electricians, who want to work in their field, are willing to work any other job. But even those who are willing to work any job are still finding it difficult to find employment. Working for Arabs also eliminates the language barrier. And working under the table, some people do this to supplement their welfare income because it's not enough. But some of these situations can make them more vulnerable. Some people have said that they've worked under the table and they haven't been paid after they finish the work. So a lot of people have said that they would like to be educated more about their rights as employees and then their rights in general. One of the participants said that her husband was injured at work and his boss told him not to report it as a work injury. So when he went to the hospital, he said that he got injured elsewhere, and he didn't know until a few months later that he could have been compensated for that injury. So they've requested to just have casual meetings with lawyers to educate them about their rights. Maybe like these lawyers would be volunteers where they just have a casual conversation and tell them about any issues they may be going through and get some advice from them. Volunteering is one of the options, but only 1% of the survey participants said they are volunteering. And self-employment is also an option for some people who couldn't find jobs, but they're saying that this is also a challenge for them because for some, it's the financial capital is a challenge. For others, it's the laws and the paperwork and everything that needs to be done to start a business that they are that they need help with, and they've requested mentoring from people who can show them the ropes and make the process a little easier for them. Language is obviously another major theme that came up. So we've said that language is a barrier to employment, to forming new relationships, but it's also a barrier to education, healthcare, being able to defend themselves in legal matters. We heard from those who speak, whose English skills are a little bit better, that it was easier for them to resettle. Like one of our participants, she was able to find a home before she came to Canada because she could go online and went on Google Maps and search for an address. She was able to see her kids' school and everything. But the majority of participants are struggling with this regard. So only 33% compared to the 15% who we said initially came to Canada with intermediate or advanced, 33% are now intermediate and 13 are advanced. And most of them have taken classes in the past or are still taking ESL classes. But we found that PSRs are more likely to have intermediate or advanced English, and that's because they tend to have a higher level of education, whereas some Syrian refugees have absolutely no education, so they're illiterate in Arabic, so they can't read and write in Arabic, so it's even more difficult for them to learn English. And one of the things that I tell people who have some time before coming to Canada is to start learning English before coming to Canada, to at least get some basics, and then once they arrive here, then they can continue. A lot of people said that they found ESL classes ineffective. Some just found it completely ineffective, but others say they feel like they are learning. in their ESL classes, but they're not retaining what they're learning once they leave. And one of those is that they don't have opportunities to practice English. And we found in the surveys that those who are intermediate or have advanced English skills are more likely to have friends who are non-Arabs and more likely to have improved their English by interacting with native English speakers. And the people who said they found work through their family and friends, they said that that's how they improved their English. When they were hired, they didn't even speak English. So arranging for them opportunities to meet non-Arabs, to maybe matching them with volunteers, or immersing them in speaking environments, English speaking environments, can help them learn English a lot faster than if they were just taking BSL classes. Housing, all the refugees received help with finding housing. They received help from organizations, community centers, friends, and so on. But 40% said they found difficulty with this. PSRs did say it was easier for them to find housing than GARs. These particular participants were more likely to have intermediate or advanced English. And once people found accommodations, 40% said it was difficult for them to rent. So their applications would get rejected because their lack of credit history or because they're not employed. So for some people, the landlord asked them to pay several months' rent. One person said he had to pay a whole year's rent for his application to be accepted. So mental health wasn't really something we discussed outright or in depth in the focus groups, but certain things did come up, like loss, people who've lost their family members, loved ones in the war, but they've also lost them by having to come to Canada and not having them near them. Also, there's a lot of stress and pressure after arrival in Canada due to unemployment and all the other things that we've discussed. People have said that they are sad or depressed because of also the same factors like unemployment and the challenges that they're facing. But also for some people, once they arrive in Canada, this is the first opportunity that they get to process their trauma. While they're still in Syria or the country of war or transitioning country, they are just surviving. They don't really have the time to process everything that they're going through. So sometimes when they arrive in Canada and they feel safe and secure, this is the first opportunity that they get to process everything that they have been through. So they might fall into a depression. A lot of people also said they experienced shock because of all the wonderful things they were told that they're going to experience in Canada, and they're going to fulfill all their dreams. And then once they come here, they realize how difficult life is and that it's not going to be as easy as they were told. And so as a result, they experience fear and anxiety, and some of them experience hopelessness and despair and don't feel like they are going to have a great future in Canada. But despite all of this, a lot of people are optimistic about their future in Canada. We see a lot of resilience and strength to keep moving forward. We see people who, despite all the difficulties, are still pursuing their dreams. They're still pursuing the path that they wanted to take. And 54% said that their mental health improved after coming to Canada. But 33% said that they would like help with their mental health, but because of the stigma, 27% said they're too embarrassed to seek mental health help with their mental health, and they requested anonymous services where if they go to like a therapist, that they don't give out their name or don't fill out any paperwork. They can just go in and talk to someone and then leave without anyone knowing who they are. So that's all I have. We can take any comments, questions.
Thank you, Aicha.
I just wanted to share a table showing the, if I may, sorry, the numbers, just because we didn't say them at the beginning. 1 second, I'll see if I can do that right now. Okay, and can everyone see this chart?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just the breakdown of focus group participation to give some context to the participants in this group. So we conducted 13 focus groups. 6 of these were with women, 7 of these were with men. And the participants in the focus groups included 60 privately sponsored refugees, including 35 women and 25 men, and 58 government assisted refugees, including 29 women and 29 men, and then 5 additional participants, including 4 men who had come to Canada through the blended visa office referred program, and 1 man who was an asylum seeker. And I'm also going to give you the numbers for the survey. There were a few frequency distribution shared, like percentages of participants who said such and such, shared based on questions that were asked through our structured survey. And so the structured survey, we had 315 participants. 147 of these were government assisted refugees. 157 of these were privately sponsored refugees. And then we had 8 blended visa office referred participants in the survey, 3 participants who responded other. We didn't have a further breakdown, so I can't tell you who they were, and then 3 people who didn't answer. But in total, we had 315 people respond. So we have quite a lot of data informing these findings. And I'm just going to go back to Aicha now. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Tearney. That was really good, helpful. Do you guys have any questions? Anything?
Yes. I raised my hand.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Okay, I have many questions, but I will only ask one at this time so other people can ask questions. And what struck me is when you said that 0% of RSPs said that volunteers help them resettle. Partly because I come from a network whose purpose is to help sponsors resettle refugees, but also because personally with our group, even after 6 years, we are still meeting with them regularly to help fill out forms, to change apartments, to get jobs. How is it that you got 0% of people saying that sponsors help them resettle? Is it the people that you talk to? Is it the way the question was asked? Could you clarify that?
So it could be in our focus groups, we had a group who was mainly sponsored by a church, a Chinese church, and they had people who were sponsors, but then they also had volunteers, but maybe they considered all of them under the sponsor category. They didn't consider them volunteers per se. But in the survey, the way the question was asked was who helped you with your resettlement. So they had options like sponsors, settlement organizations, family, friends, and volunteers was one of the options, and 0% of PSRs chose that option.
Okay, so they did not consider volunteers to be part of their settlement group.
Yes, they didn't consider volunteers to be those who helped them. Maybe they met volunteers that they just socialized with, but they didn't really consider them, like help them with resettlement.
Because sponsors would consider themselves volunteers because they don't get paid.
Oh, in this case, we didn't consider volunteers were people who didn't really sponsor anyone. It was just additional help. Sponsors were their own category.
Thank you. Yeah. I have another question, but I'll let other people ask first.
Okay. Gaida?
Gaida.
Okay, so
just to have a comment on the question that for private sponsor, many of people who come in this way, the family member helped them, so they didn't meet any volunteer. So maybe that's why they say 0 volunteer. But my question now is regarding to the study, and especially for the employment and the language. I expected to see any data show the difference between the two group, how it's different between the two group, the language barrier and the employment barrier. Is there any difference between the two kind of sponsor, private and government, and the other difference between women and men, since we focus on this? when we did the study. So any data regarding that?
Mm-hmm. We didn't really find a lot of differences between, so with employment in the focus groups, we found that the government-sponsored men were more likely to be employed than private sponsored men. And that could be because of the profiles of the two different groups, where the government sponsored were willing to take just any job in trades, whereas the private sponsors, some of them were a little bit, had higher levels of education and they were waiting to find a job in their field like engineering. So they weren't taking on jobs. But in terms of language, we didn't really find a lot of differences. With employment, we found that government-sponsored women were not as interested in working as private-sponsored women. Women were more interested in working, but they did have the concern of childcare and also wanting to be near their children. But government-sponsored women didn't really have the goal to eventually find work. And they are the ones who said they feel bored and suppressed by staying at home because they don't really have a lot going on, but they don't intend on working in the future as far as the focus groups.
Thank you.
I found it very interesting that 1/3 of interviewees already had friends and family in Canada. Can you talk a bit about how that played a role, and also whether these are PSRs or GARs or?
Mm-hmm. The survey data, we're still analyzing it. So we had some preliminary analysis, but we haven't analyzed it in depth. So I can't break it down into PSRs, and we might be able to do that in the future. But in terms of how that helped, some people came to Canada because of their friends. So one of our participants said his friends kept telling him Canada's great and they encouraged him to come here. But that doesn't necessarily translate to receiving help. Some people did have family that helped them. Some people had family that wanted to help but couldn't because they didn't have access to the information. They've been here for 20 or 30 years. They're not newcomers. They haven't been through the process of resettlement. So they don't even know about the services that are available. So some of them, they would go to their family members and they would ask them questions, and their family members would just say, I don't know, I can't help you. So they did receive help with some of the basic things like taking them grocery shopping and things like that. But a lot of them would ask questions like about accreditation or about language equivalency, and they wouldn't get help from their relatives or friends who've been here for a very long time. So that's actually something interesting, because the newcomers were saying that they find people who, whether immigrants or other refugees who arrived a few years before them, to be a lot more helpful than Canadians who have been here for a very long time, because those people have been through the process and they know what the system is and, you know, the best ways to make progress on whatever goal they're trying to reach. But Canadians who have been here a long time don't really know how things work because everything is in place already for them.
To add to, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, to add to that, we, as Aicha said, we are still analyzing the survey data, but I can tell you that 66 of our survey participants, so 21% of our participants were privately sponsored refugees who had been sponsored by a relative in Canada, just to give some context to that.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see who raised their hands first. I think Esme, and then we'll go to Farzana and Merrick.
Yeah. So I have more of a comment than a question. Thank you for that great presentation, Aicha. And I just want to send out compliments, because honestly, when Usha promised, did the original meeting, and I was like, oh my goodness, you promised the world. This is like a good portion of all the Syrians who have arrived in Toronto, and you're going to find them all. So this team has been absolutely amazing. So kudos all around. From a social science perspective, to get 300 plus interviewing, it's amazing. So congratulations. I'm delighted to be able to connect with you guys on this. So.
Thank you, Esme. I have to say that the research assistants did an amazing job with recruitment. It was just so quick. We got the focus groups done, I think, in like 6 months. And then the surveys in the middle of the pandemic, we still got it done. So it all goes, the research assistants deserve all the credit for that.
So I'll go next. So I want to echo Esme. I think this is phenomenal. The amount of people that you've been able to reach out to and kind of have participated in focus groups is just amazing. And it is, it's compliments to your team. I think it's a little sad that no matter what the same kind of findings keep coming up, right, in terms of barriers to employment, barriers to, integration, barriers to settlement. So I was wondering, what is the unique value proposition of this study finding, right? And I think one thing that would be very valuable for someone would be to understand what suggestions participants had in terms of making the refugee sponsorship process better for refugees, right? So did you get a lot of those kinds of feedback about what could be done to improve the sponsorship process, improve maybe sponsor training, maybe education? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. We actually got a lot of feedback from them on what they think would work. And a lot of my suggestions or recommendations that I presented today comes from them because they obviously know, they're experts in their own lives and they know what works and what doesn't work. They've been through the process. And we have other recommendations that I didn't include today just because of time, but maybe we can compile all of that and say, into like a report, and because putting through their voices is really important.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I was just curious, and this may be, first of all, I want to say great study and very good presentation. Mm-hmm. You just explained everything so clearly, and it is so interesting, and so much came out of this. I'm very impressed. I was wondering, did you gather any information on their life before they arrived in Canada, to be able to compare how successful they are in Canada and what their problems are? I know that people who were illiterate in their native language have far more difficulty learning English. That's been established. We found in our groups that those who were entrepreneurial and go-getters before they arrived in Canada were more able to get jobs and to progress ahead here, whereas those who had depended upon their family system at home arrived and they were kind of lost when they got to Canada. And I was just wondering if you had gathered any information to be able to make that comparison.
We don't have a lot of data on that. It wasn't really a question that we asked. We didn't ask too many questions about their life in Syria before the war or before they came here. It did come up a little bit in terms of some of the challenges they were facing, but people would talk about them being farmers, and even if they're not educated, some of them, once they reach grade 9, they just go into their dad's business or they go into trades. And the way that they go into trades is a little bit different than here. They just go through an informal apprenticeship and then they start their own business. And because the system there is different than here it's a lot more formal, especially like with all the paperwork you need to start a business. That's what they're finding challenging. Also the way people connect, with each other is different. Syrians are very friendly people and they're very social, but the way you connect through, let's say, even humor, it doesn't always translate when English is your second language. So when they're trying to build, their life here and build businesses, it's more challenging just because of all the barriers that we talked about. But I don't have too much data on that to really be able to give you like a conclusive point on what their experiences are before and how that translates to their experiences here.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Excuse me. Yeah, somehow, there is this sense within me saying, we have been doing these kinds of studies for the last 30 years. The issues are the same. The barriers are the same. So how can we make things move? Because we completely come up with all of these things and then we'll stop there. One of the things that has a couple of things in my mind are that one of the things that has helped recently is that in Ontario, all that requirement for trades, correct me if I'm wrong, and if anybody knows all the details about apprenticeship and who can follow whom and all of that kind of stuff has been removed. That was a huge barrier because as far as I know, in the skilled apprenticeship programs or apprentice programs for skilled people, a skilled Canadian or a skilled carpenter, for example, could take only 2 people. My number may not be right, or 3 people. There was such a limit to the apprenticeship program, so the entry was so, controlled. So it is taken off now, so we need to find out how and where, what kind of impact it will have. The other thing I always feel is that our information, especially from the settlement agencies, or what the government thinks as settlement that there should be sort of given information on, stays the same. Okay, go get accreditation, go ask people, go do this. Is there some more dynamic way of engaging people? So somebody goes to a settlement agency and they are given all this information, and then the understanding is that they take this information and that's enough for them. So as has been indicated by some participants, that they should have an ongoing connection with these agencies so that if there is new knowledge, they could be giving new services, or even from connecting with each other. So, instead of thinking of meeting with a settlement worker for once to get all this information, it has to be an ongoing relationship. Of course, there is going to be questions around finances and who's going to pay the bill and how can we do this and all of that. But somehow, my own sense is that that whole settlement process we always talk about has become, circling around, just going round and round the circle. It has to be opened up and broken in a different way so that people can access these services and then feel that they are being helped and these services can be useful. Because many did not go to settlement agencies. That's the other thing as well. Yeah. And then even some information on what makes for success actually in Canada. I mean, not everybody achieves the same level of success, but at least in terms of moving forward, we always found that people need to know that perseverance is really important. You have to be innovative, all of that. So all those kind of soft skills that people need, sometimes we forget to kind of tell them that, look, even if you don't get the first job interview, the second job interview, do this, do that. So people have to be consistent. And in some ways, when I say that, I'm also very aware of the fact that the systemic barriers that exist are far too many that can deter anyone from trying again and again. So it's a difficult world, I would say.
Shamiram's had her hand up. Can we hear from you, Shamiram?
Sorry.
No, not to cut you off. I'm just trying to let people.
Oh, thank you, Usha. I just want to echo what you said, and Marika, thank you for the question. It's really important, and I think understanding Syrian experience in Syria, or Syrian newcomer or refugee prior to arriving to Canada, I think will help us address a lot of the potential barriers that they may experience here. And the reason I say that, I'm speaking both as a Syrian immigrant / Canadian, and having helped with the resettlement and this project, among other projects, what I've noticed is what happens is that these structural, so like Aicha was alluding to from the data, as well as my knowledge of Syrian culture, it's very, the modes on mobility, the way that you move up into social hierarchies in Syria is through the social networks, because there are truly, within Syrian society, we lacked formal ways from government or social society services where we can mobilize upwards. So coming to a country like Canada, where these established mechanisms exist, it becomes difficult for people who have existed in a very specific way of operating, that your social connection is what helps you mobilize forward. And then you come here and there's these really formal ways of trying to navigate the system. What happens is that many of the kind of assumptions that a person brings with them from the old country. So for example, nepotism came up quite frequently, that like, because that's in Syria, that's typically how one mobilizes upwards socially. And so when social services in Canada are not kind of delivering to what is needed, sometimes the individual, the participant's perspective is like, well, maybe these informal channels do exist in Canada as well, just like they did in Syria. And so part of understanding Syrian experience in Syria will help social services try to address these kind of stereotypes. They're not stereotypes, but these like kind of established understanding of how the world works in Syria, but let's shatter it in Canada, because here, you know, we have systems. And so I agree with Usha, it's about rejigging the system in a way that can address these issues and these barriers from, let's say, individuals who have low literacy skills, who come from farming communities. And another point, Syrians we lived in our own geographical areas, and so movements across the country, although the country is geographically very small, it wasn't encouraged. So people stick together within their small communities, and there's a lot of misconceptions about the other. So there's a lot of that too. It's complicated, but I'll leave it at that for today.
Right.
And then I think Yasmin has their hand up.
And Fumi also.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to comment on the settlement services that Usha has just mentioned. I think ideally approaching to settlement services is not one time, right? So there's an initial intake and then to really learn about the needs of the clients, and then whatever any organization can provide internally, there will be repeat visit, and then for anything that the organization cannot provide, referrals should be made to connect clients to the services they need. So, but I agree that one challenge is knowing the services. So for those who are connected with services, it's easier, because once they are connected with one, it's easier to be referred to others. The challenge is always, how do we reach out to those who don't know their services, and then where are they? The traditional outreach method would not work, because if they're not accessing services, we try to just promote among ourselves, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, so just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
I thought I saw Fumi's hand.
Thank you, Aicha. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Just to echo what everybody has been saying, like presently I work part-time too with a resettlement service, and I keep trying, I struggle a lot about, having like a structured goal, what you expect success to be, instead of trying to meet the your client, your service user in the middle, like, okay, how can we support you? These are the resources I'm bringing. How can we support you to achieve the goals, to navigate the system, or to break the barriers you're facing? But I see most settlement services, having this goal, like, this is what we want you to achieve. We want you to get this job. We want you to get accreditation, accredited, and we want you to be able to integrate into the society. Like, it's always from the government lens, not from the service users lens. And I think most settlement services should try to like magnify the voices of these individuals they represent, in order for them to settle well, and also to change the narrative about successful integration. Successful integration, like what Usha said, might be different in different individuals. Like, you shouldn't just try to like cluster people together because they represent this nation and you expect them to act in that way. So I think everybody should be, each individual should be seen as an entity, and their goals should be different. Also, Aicha, I don't know if you mentioned it, I was thinking like, maybe when you were doing the research, did you try to like identify the different sponsors, like what kind of organizations they are? and how this might influence the type of support the people they sponsor. Like you mentioned, like this Chinese church that withdrew at one point. Did you try to like explore if, you know, such type of organization could also influence the kind of support they provide to the refugees? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, the Chinese church is a really good example of a group who was extremely, extremely organized. They had, they started contact with the refugees before they arrived in Canada. And then once they arrived, they had divided people based on their strengths. So some people were dedicated to dealing with things related to education. A group was dedicated to healthcare, and a group was dedicated to like employment. So when I think there were 7 or 8 families that arrived, and the group.
Aicha, you're mute.
I got disconnected, sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that particular church, they only wanted to sponsor those 7 or 8 families, and they put in all the work to support them. But then there's a different kind of sponsorship where churches and mosques and other organizations are only playing the role of like a signature on a paper. They are bringing them here so that they can come to Canada because they don't have another option to leave the transitioning country. And then once they arrive here, they're on their own. So they don't provide financial support. They don't provide any kind of support. And those are the private refugees who end up not having access to services and end up having to struggle on their own. And for some of them, they end up not knowing about these services until like a year later, 2 years later, which just makes their resettlement a lot harder. So it really depends on, so like I said, like the group of 5 are really effective in providing support, but most of the ones who are brought by organizations don't really receive anything. And even our survey, some people told me, because I'm sitting there with them while they do the survey, they'll say, my sponsor did not give me any money, but I'm just going to put yes, because one of the questions was, did your sponsor give you financial support during the first year? They'll say yes, just because they don't want their sponsor to look bad. So the numbers of people who've said yes is actually probably lower than what we have in the surveys.
Yeah. And so actually around how many percentage said that they have met their sponsor?
52% said they didn't meet their sponsors, or that they didn't receive support from their sponsors. So maybe they met them, but didn't.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But also the comments that we were saying about organizations, I think we have to just also remember that the time when Syrian refugees started arriving in large numbers, it was really overwhelming for organizations to be able to deal with every single refugee and to be able to study every single refugee's need and then create a plan to help them resettle in the best way possible. But there are solutions to that. Like there are certain information that could be easily put online that newcomers can find, but I think you go to Canada government websites and the information is just so difficult to navigate. And today with YouTube and all that, a lot of that information can be made accessible, that people don't have to rely just on settlement workers. Maybe there are certain things that they can't do online or can't find online, but there are certain things that we can create, like brochures and videos, and to make it easier so that it's not all falling on settlement workers who are like even now with like Afghans, if they're arriving also in large numbers, it's going to be the same problem, because how many settlement workers are there for every refugee that is arriving? So we have to figure out a better system for them to receive information and to receive support. Any more questions before we end?
Oh, I was going to say that, Esme.
Yeah.
I was just, hi, thank you, Esme. Can I say?
Thank you, Farzana.
Say that the video idea sounds great, because especially if you can do some in Arabic, for example, for people who come, they can listen to it and so on. So I must think about that. We have a little bit of left from the project. Maybe we should try one or two.
Yeah, and they can be translated once the video is made. It can be translated into
Right.
any language where a large group is arriving.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good thinking. Yeah. Is it? Yeah. It's almost time.
Yeah.
Again, I want.
No more questions.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Wonderful work.
Esme, thank you. Esme is our data expert, so she helps us through all the analysis that needs to happen along with Joanne. Thank you, Esme. Yeah. She is at GE, as you know, and then of course all the participants here, all the partners here. I'm really grateful because this we kind of send the proposal to this project thinking, oh, they could say, what's the difference? They have done these kinds of work, but it was rated very high, and we were really lucky to have got funded. So we want to take this further to see how the findings from the study can be literally translated to knowledge that can be used by individuals concerned. Hi, Kid.
Oh, Gaida, did you say something? We didn't hear you.
Yeah. I just asking if we can get the presentation. Can you send the presentation?
Yeah, I'll send it to everyone. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. It was really useful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aicha. And thank you, Tearney, for
Aicha.
organizing all of this.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.